Sam Malaber. He will speak on the military complex and media apparatus around Activision, Blizzard's modern warfare. And Sam is an MFA candidate in design and media arts at UCLA and a game master at the UCLA Game Lab. They make work about US imperialism, escapist fantasies, and the intersection between the two. They have shown work at Massachusetts College of Art and Design, UCLA, and various DIY spaces in Boston, Massachusetts. Their work is currently on display as part of the online DMA preview exhibition Share Screen. So I'm going to hand it over to Sam now.
Hi, I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see that? Okay, cool, perfect. All right, thank you so much for hosting this. Thank you to Anthony, that was awesome. I'm going to talk a little fast to try to get through all of this. So without further ado, the military complex and media apparatus around Activision Blizzard's modern warfare. This presentation is about the 2019 first-person shooter game, Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Honestly, at first, Modern Warfare wasn't really on my radar. So when a Call of Duty billboard depicting three gray and grizzled soldiers appeared over my bus stop one morning, I kind of just ignored it. Then right around the time the game came out, I saw a news article titled Modern Warfare Rewrites the Highway of Death. Now that I noticed. The Highway of Death came to be the name of a war crime perpetrated by the US military. The US shot and bombed a retreating column of Iraqi vehicles over the course of 10 hours. It would later be discovered that the column contained Kuwaiti hostages, defectors, and civilian refugees. And attacking military forces outside of combat is sort of in and of itself a war crime. In Call of Duty Modern Warfare, their highway of death would take place in the fictional Middle Eastern nation of Urzikstan. Though the game's account mentions the killing of fleeing civilians, it attributes the war crime not to US forces, but to the invading Russians. Numerous articles criticized this historical revisionism, and the game was review bombed by Russian gamers. Many news sources reported erroneously that the game was banned from distribution in Russia. In fact, it was still for sale there, but one distributor, Sony, had pulled it of its own accord. Despite all this controversy, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019 would be the top-selling game of the year, the 19th best-selling game of all time, and its spin-off free-to-play multiplayer mode, Call of Duty Warzone, would have, as of this writing, 110 million active users, which, to put that number in perspective, is about 1/3 of the US population. I wanted to figure out what prompts a commercial game company to rewrite a US military war crime. Modern Warfare is no stranger to political sort of controversy, but their frequent defense is to claim that the events of their game are fictional. This makes this Highway of Death controversy kind of unique because although the game events are fictional, they specifically use the real name of the event. Okay, so first, what is Modern Warfare? Modern Warfare is a first-person shooter, and it's a reboot of the 2007 first-person shooter Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. I'm going to call it COD 4 moving forward. The developers of the game, in their words, say that this 2019 version of Modern Warfare moves from the post-9/11 malaise that characterized the first game to a sort of new era where there's, quote, no clean and simple end to any conflict. The developers describe Modern Warfare as, quote, inspired heavily by events in Iraq and in Syria and the Arab Spring and with the Soviet invasion of like Afghanistan in the 80s, and is dealing with themes of sort of asymmetric and proxy warfare and, quote, concepts like colonialism and like occupation. They also kind of like assert that the game is in no way political. Honestly, modern warfare is not super different from COD 4. It has the US doing imperial intervention to stop war, not to start it. There's the portrayal of Muslim coded terrorists as an evil threat to the West that could strike any time. However, there are some differences. While COD 4 had empty streets and the only remnants of civilian life being rugs and furniture, and as games discourse calls it, quote, like environmental storytelling. This new modern warfare has civilians succumbing to chemical weapons attacks. It has mothers you shoot as they move from their child's crib to grab a bomb detonator. It has terrorists playing dead in an occupied hospital. Where COD 4 had you stalk through the ruins of Chernobyl to kind of like give you like a reminder of Soviet failure. This one rewrites a US war crime as a Russian one. Basically, it's all the same, just worse. Previous scholarship has situated Call of Duty games in a category called military realism. The games are sort of obsessed with having accurate depictions of weapons and vehicles, how soldiers move, etc., but they completely ignore the broader politics of US war. Though this idea of military realism kind of helps to talk about Modern Warfare 2019, I felt it doesn't really adequately explain why modern warfare would wade so brazenly into geopolitical controversy. However, part of this previous analysis of military realism might give maybe like a helpful explanation into that. One of the ways that Call of Duty games ensure and advertise their realism is by using ex-military and intelligence consultants, as well as consulting with the US military itself. As such, I'm going to do something potentially like a little weird, to explain why Modern Warfare might have rewritten the highway of death. Modern Warfare is a really big game. It has a campaign story mode with 14 missions. It has a cooperative game mode that continues that campaign story. It has a multiplayer mode. It has the attached Warzone mode. It has a store inside of the game. And I'm going to, for the most part, ignore all of this. Instead, I'm going to analyze Modern Warfare through a very small section of its end credits, specifically the section of the credits that lists the ex and current military consultants on Modern Warfare. If I want to figure out why Modern Warfare would rewrite a US military war crime, it makes sense to start with its closest connection to the military itself. Here's who the consultants were on Modern Warfare. The first category is non-military. The one is like a tactical gear manufacturer and extremist Christian gun nut. We're going to ignore him for this presentation. Of the others, one is Fox News war correspondent, and some cultural consultants. But the game sort of lets the military speak for itself, but doesn't let the civilians of the areas affected speak for themselves. They have to speak through these cultural consultants. So I'm going to prioritize what the game prioritizes. I'm going to ignore these ones as well. In the rest of this presentation, I'm going to address these ex-military/intelligence consultants, what their perspectives are, and how it appears those perspectives made it or didn't make it into the game. Then I'm going to outline what military support means for film and television, as it can give some insight into what it could mean for video games. Then I'm going to outline what little I know about military support for video games generally and Call of Duty specifically, and try to map that incomplete, but I argue essential relationship onto Modern Warfare. Because both of these things are referred to as military consultants, it can get a little bit confusing. An ex-military/intelligence consultant is someone who's formerly in the military or intelligence who the developer hires to consult on the game. Though their input and knowledge likely has a deep effect on the game, they have no power over it. Further, they're kind of the most visible part of the military's connection to a game like Modern Warfare because they can like appear like in advertising for the game, endorsing the game they helped make, and kind of advocating that it's accurate, essentially. Military support, like from the actual US military, works differently. The game developer reaches out to the military and asks for support on their production. The developer can get support in the form of access to military bases, access to military equipment, using troops as extras, or consulting with military technical advisors who are current members of the military. This is a contractual sort of obligation for support, and I should note that there is no unofficial support, there's full support or nothing at all. As Tom Secker and Matthew Alford, whose research I will rely on heavily, note, recognizing the deliberate propaganda role of this military support pushes against the idea that these kind of media are our collective dreams instead of coming from the top down. Further, they emphasize how we discussed this propaganda role is completely different for scholarship on countries we deem authoritarian, like Call of Duty's consistent villain Russia. So it is worth looking at how a supposedly commercial piece of media from the US frequently villainizes other nations is also propaganda. Before I talk about military support for Call of Duty, I want to talk about the ex-military who worked on the game to show their current ties to the military-industrial complex and military-supported media. And also so we can see what part of their narratives might have made it into the game. Two ex-Navy SEALs consulted on modern warfare, Mitchell Hall and Stephen Sanders, who collectively make up the military consulting company Six Shooters. They gave the game perspective on what it was like to be a, quote, tier one operator and imparted to the developers the, quote, math they need to do to calculate whether an unknown, as they call it, is a civilian or like an enemy combatant. Before modern warfare, Sanders worked on Man of Steel, which was extensively rewritten by the Department of Defense with 6 months of negotiations and rewrites before they gave support. Hall worked on Act of Valor, a film that was directly commissioned by the Navy. He worked on Zero Dark 30, a film with CIA support where the CIA removed a scene where a detainee is tortured and threatened with a dog, despite evidence of this taking place at Guantanamo Bay and photos of this taking place at Abu Ghraib. And he also worked on Lone Survivor, another film where DoD support led to rewrites, and he also worked on previous games in the Call of Duty franchise. Thanks to photos on the Six Shooters website, we know a bit about Hall's time in the covert Navy SEALs. He was a bodyguard for the U.S. installed president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai. To quote from the New York Times, Mr. Karzai became a bitter critic of the United States Special Operations Troops, complaining that they routinely killed civilians in raids. This includes the Navy SEALs. He eventually tried to block night raids entirely. Modern warfare would include a no-knock night raid by the British Special Forces faction of the SAS, where Hall and Sanders acted as the motion capture models. This broader context is never mentioned in the game. The other ex-military / intelligence consultants who worked on modern warfare is from the CIA. John McGaffin was the #2 spy master coordinating CIA black operations from 1963 to 1993. He was the head of the CIA program to fund the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. He is quoted as telling another CIA officer to join this project in the 80s. If it's really true that you have nothing to do, why not come upstairs? We're killing Russians. His response to the 9/11 attacks that was perpetrated by, as Call of Duty would call them, the freedom fighters he helped fund, was to co-author an op-ed title that was titled America Needs More Spies. Though now retired, he is a senior director at the Centra Technology, Inc., a defense contractor that offers irregular warfare support, including in forward deployed locations in Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa, and South America. Basically, despite being ex-CIA, this is a man who now actively profits off of continued involvement in U.S. covert proxy wars. He was also the technical advisor for the show Homeland. Now I'm going to detail what official military support means. Tons of media has been supported by the U.S. military. Military support is not just for media like modern warfare that tries to, quote, realistically depict U.S. war. Almost every movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe has had DoD support. Documentaries have to go through this process, and in a couple instances, music videos like Katy Perry's Part of Me, for example. That's the picture up on the right. Military support grants access to the use of military personnel, equipment, access to military bases, highly qualified subject matter experts, aka military technical advisors or military consultants. The military grants this support on the basis that the media offers a, quote, realistic depiction of the military, including events, and contributes to our understanding of the military if it might benefit military recruitment. Essentially, the military, under the auspice of portraying itself accurately or benefiting recruitment can give conditions for support. This includes making changes to the script before support is granted, so the production can get the military to agree to support. And once the support is granted, the military has the right to review a rough cut to see whether these conditions for support have been adhered to. Alford and Secker show how military support is politically motivated and allows for the DoD to not approve scripts where an authentic portrayal of historical events or a feasible interpretation of military operations might look bad for the government or military, or to edit scripts to remove such things, sometimes with, quote, pretty radical changes, or, quote, a complete rewrite of the storyline. This includes denying support for a film proposed by a decorated veteran because the U.S. Marine Corps wanted to avoid, quote, admission in this medium that those activities, war crimes, occurred in Vietnam, or changing an actual event in a film that did receive support where U.S. Army trucks' brakes failed and crashed into shoppers in Kabul, killing 5 people, sparking protests and symbolizing for many the failure of the U.S. NATO invasion in Afghanistan. In the film, this truck was changed to an NGO vehicle. At the request of the military. It seems that the military's definition of authentic portrayal lines up well with this game definition of military realism, where the accuracy of equipments, tactics, and vehicles and physical depictions of personnel are necessary, but any discussion of war crimes or the broader political implications of U.S. military action are deliberately excised or altered. Not only does military support then constitute an obligation, a relationship of power over how the military is depicted, that power has had an effect. These examples show a practice of rewriting actual events by the military that seems relevant to modern warfare's rewriting of the highway of death. Military support for video games. Existing research tends to kind of emphasize games that have been produced directly by the military, like America's Army. With commercial games like Modern Warfare, when this military support is mentioned in games media, it is used as a sign of realism, like an authenticity. In critical perspectives on these games, the distinction of military branded games and commercial games is clearly delineated, but this power relation of military support blurs that distinction. There hasn't been a ton of research into this. However, there's a little bit that can be gleaned from FOIA documents that Tom Secker and Matthew Alford have released, specifically the U.S. Marine Corps Entertainment Media Liaison Office weekly reports from 2008 to 2015. In it, the U.S. Marine Corps discusses allowing the developers of the game Fallout New Vegas to record demolitions, despite the game not including the Marines, and also going to E3, like a massive game conference, to network with producers and distributors. There's also a connection with Call of Duty specifically. Infinity Ward, the developers of Modern Warfare, reached out at that E3 to request filming footage of vehicles for CGI purposes, and the Marine Corps discussed with them, including the Marine Corps in the game. Infinity Ward requested to shoot footage of an exercise at 29 Palms Base, access to all the vehicles pictured here, and the weekly reports note that the U.S. Marine Corps was waiting for a treatment and storyline of the game prior to approving support. All of these vehicles and the Marine Corps were represented in Modern Warfare 3. However, though the game credits a police department and numerous weapons manufacturers, it doesn't credit, as far as I can tell, the Marines or any U.S. military branch. So it may not have received support. However, because the ELO reports confirm that the support they requested, like access to these vehicles going to that exercise, would require a storyline or treatment, this understanding of that relationship, I argue, can be mapped back onto COD 4 and mapped forward onto Modern Warfare, two games that do credit the U.S. Marine Corps. So when the developers of COD 4 claim their game is realistic because they talk to, quote, real Marines only weeks outside of combat, or went to, quote, live fire exercises at 29 Palms, a Marine training facility, or, quote, stood there while they fired tanks, and credit the Marine Corps Public Affairs Office, multiple Marine units, and a potentially active duty military technical advisor, they are describing military support, meaning that the military had power over how COD 4 represented them on screen. So when COD 4 has the military coup leader of a, quote, unnamed Middle Eastern country, Khalid al-Assad, use nuclear weapons to wipe out the U.S. invasion force in the game, that's how the U.S. military directly wants to be represented in a narrative that they had control over. And when the developers of Modern Warfare 2019 say they've worked very closely with military consultants, when the game credits two active duty Marine Corps Public Affairs officers and credits the Marine Corps Entertainment Media Liaison Office and the U.S. Marine Corps as a consultant itself, and gives special thanks to the commander of the Marine Aircraft Wing and the director of the Infantry Immersion Trainer at Camp Pendleton, which is where Marines conduct role-playing simulations and war games in mock Middle Eastern villages. All this constitutes military support. So when Modern Warfare rewrites the Highway of Death, the military had power over rewriting and approved it for support. Military support means that the military had the power and the right to rewrite Modern Warfare. Whether they exercise that power or not matters, I argue, very little. That power matters in and of itself. It means that when Modern Warfare rewrites a U.S. war crime as a Russian one, that's how the military wants to be portrayed. When Modern Warfare reframes the 20-year-long U.S. so-called war on terror as the same as the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which, by the way, U.S. covert action helped to instigate, that's how the military wants to be framed. When Modern Warfare portrays the U.S. as merely responding to colonialism perpetrated by other supposed superpowers, when Modern Warfare shows the CIA only funding freedom fighters, or when Modern Warfare shows certain undeniable realities of U.S. war, like torture or civilian collateral damage, but curated in a way that minimizes the involvement of the U.S. military and always recontextualizes them with worse crimes, waterboarding, use of chemical weapons by Russia, that's all a portrayal that the military materially supports. This also means that when the developers and games media tout this support as lending Modern Warfare authenticity, they are ignoring that the military has power over that authentic portrayal. And when they erroneously claim that Russia banned Modern Warfare, it's not only false, but it also omits that Modern Warfare is directly military supported propaganda, and that power matters to the broader media landscape around the game, regardless of whether the developers are very enthusiastic or willing subjects of that power. It also benefits recruitment because they stream this game on Twitch. Thank you. I'm sorry for running over time. Thank you all so much for listening.